You'll be surprised how these large organizations actually kill more entrepreneurs than support them. I'm 100% accountable as the CEO, and now roadmaps have changed into the company. You have to find the joy of missing out.
Welcome back, everybody, to the Breakout CEO podcast. I'm your host, Jeff Holman with Intellectual Strategies. I get the pleasure of talking with a lot of cool people about their companies. I work with CEOs. I see what's going on behind the scenes. And it's stuff that CEOs don't always share with everybody else because, you know, it's CEO stuff. Some of it's really good. Some of it's really tough. But this podcast, the Breakout CEO, is all about getting behind the scenes with some smart CEOs who are scaling their businesses and sharing a few breakout moments from their businesses, how they think about it, how they approached it, how they solved it. And today we get the pleasure of having both a great guest and a good friend of mine, Saul Leal, here with us. Saul, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Jeff. It's a great honor. Thank you for having me.
Oh, it's a pleasure. We just had some really great discussion. Some of it was recorded, some of it wasn't. For those people in the audience who haven't heard the icebreaker segment with Saul, I think you should go back to it. I really enjoyed it, and I also got the benefit of a little bit of after commentary or in between commentary that isn't recorded, but you know that's always special for me because there's something Saul about being able to sit down with a CEO and talk to a CEO as a person, in addition to talking about the business, right? I think a lot of the community sees CEOs as, you know, they're either on this pedestal, either, you know, to revere perhaps, or maybe to, you know, maybe some people are not as happy about CEOs and the what appears to be the disparities or whatever. CEOs just have a lot to deal with. And so I know that talking with CEOs and seeing stuff behind the scenes, there's so much more dimension and depth than even what most people see. Do you feel like am I capturing the role a little bit that you filled as a CEO for the last, how long has it been since you've been doing OneMeta?
It's been about almost 4 years, 3 years and a half.
4 years. Okay.
Yeah, so absolutely. I think there are different paths to Rome, and there are different journeys. And within Rome, just to follow the analogy, there are different destinations in Rome. So there you can go through a corporate career and be the CEO of a company after being the director, the president, the vice president, the senior vice president, the CFO, the CTO, or the chief revenue officer, and then come to a CEO. So there are just different paths. Also, there is doing a startup, and within a startup, you grow because you're doing a lot of things. You're the visionary, and you're taking the company from 0 to 1, and it becomes your baby. And then that baby as a company grows because of a teenager. And sometimes you have to be detached of the company. So there are different maturity levels while carrying the CEO responsibility. But throughout all of those, there are lessons that connect all CEOs, and it's the responsibility of having individuals report to you, the responsibility to have shareholders depend on you, stakeholders, and then carrying a vision to execution on a yearly basis, on a quarterly basis.
It's a very demanding role, and very few people, I think, understand the full demands or empathize with people who are having to manage those demands. So I want to jump into your business some. And one of the things that strikes me about you and your business, there are a few people that I can distinctly remember talking with about AI before the whole AI launched, right? You think back to when ChatGPT or, you know, Claude, all those were making these big announcements like this is here, right? You were in this scene before, at least as far as I recall, maybe correct me if I'm wrong. I think you were on the scene well before these companies made their big announcements.
Yeah, I was involved a little bit. It was probably a year before. what we call the great breakthrough of OpenAI and revealing
Hmm.
ChatGPT and the speed and the large language models. That's so I started the company about a year before, maybe, and I had a connection with Microsoft, so I got to see um, a few aspects of OpenAI a couple months before the public, and at that time, it was very revealing to me that the especially the large language models were going to become a commodity, and it was a incredible high barrier of entry
Hmm.
to go into that. You needed, the cost to build a model was about 14 to $50 million. To, by the way, now is it about 80,000 to $100,000. So
Wow.
it went from 40 million to 6 million to 7 million, then to three, and just in the last few years. So it's become rapidly a commodity. What I could afford, so as a initially as a solopreneur at the time with a specific vision, as I wanted to get passionate about the concepts, finding a specific problem to solve that I feel connected with. And for me, it's always about adding value in a meaningful way, but you always get constrained because of resources. I focus on data sets, and that ultimately has become a great um, strategy. Recently, a few months ago, Nvidia announced that our technology will be on the chips, and we're on their
Hmm.
website.
It's
Um,
amazing.
and it was a very specific decision early on where we focus on data sets and how to train models. So that has become uh, a good a good compass, if nothing else,
Yeah.
to the business.
Well, and we'll get into what the business does a little bit more. But carrying on with this theme of you getting in a little bit ahead of the trend, like the other thing that I remember, and we may have had some conversations about this at some point, was the name of your company, OneMeta. I believe you had that name not too long before the whole Facebook transition to Meta, and right, you were ahead of that curve too. How are you on the front edge of these waves so much?
There's the conceptual aspect of being ahead, and there's the practical execution aspect of being ahead. So I think that conceptually, I've been ahead mostly because I'm overall I'm an early adopter.
Yeah.
I like the early adoption process, and it's something that personally feeds me. So I'm always looking at those. The name of the company was fascinating because um, it was basically comes from the word one goal. That was my
Hmm.
objective of one universe and one of purpose. So
Yeah.
meta means universe or goal, meta, like the goal in Spanish, and then one. I was being fascinated with, being the first or opening or pioneering. I always
Okay.
like the concept of being a pioneer. Uh, Probably mostly for living in Utah and having not a direct relationship, but more of a legacy relationship with the pioneers. And as I grew up into the community, I always admired the pioneers that came from the east and came to Utah. So I always like the concept of pioneering and being the first or one. So
Hmm.
that's kind of where the name came from. It's one meta, one universe, one purpose. So um, interesting enough, that I was almost looking for a problem to solve with that name, if that makes sense.
So you had a concept. You're like, I want to work on something big, new, pioneering, and so did the name actually precede the company?
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
Oh, okay.
In a way, I, the original name for the company was Meta Language,
Hmm.
and before we got acquired by into a public company, and so it was. I already had the name while I was looking into it, and But so it came very naturally. But the original name was Meta Language, which is a universe of languages.
Well, with that, let's give the audience a flavor for what the business is. Like, where did it start, and where is it today? What types of things are you doing? Just a quick note about our guests. I host the Breakout CEO podcast to share behind the scenes insights from scaling businesses. As an attorney, I see the real challenges leaders face long before success becomes public. But client stories have to stay confidential. So we invite guest CEOs to share their own moments of struggle and success. I'm so grateful to our guests and my team at Intellectual Strategies for making this show possible. Now, let's get back to the show.
So I'll start with the mission because it's very attached to it. So the mission is to create a more understanding world.
Okay.
So all of our products, all of our initiative is about understanding. How do we create a more understanding world? And as we try to break down understanding, we start with data sets and how, especially transcription. So the original challenge was any large language model needs another model that precedes it because the large language model needs text. So you need another model to convert a speech to text. So about 4 years ago, a speech to text accuracy in English, it was and it still is about 98 to 99%. It's really accurate. You still have some challenges in the normalization on personal identifiable information, but overall, there's a lot of data in English. Spanish is second, and Spanish is about used to be about 73, 75%. Right now, it's about 83 to 85% over the last 4 years.
Okay.
But any other language besides those, accuracy is not very good. Accuracy, it's a challenge. So if you go into Japanese, Swahili, German, Portuguese, accuracy becomes a challenge on the speech to text, especially when you go into dialects within a language. So think of your Spanish Argentinian versus your Spanish Cuban versus your Spanish Mexico, or English Ghana versus English South Africa or English Australia. So when you start going to dialects, it becomes a lot more difficult and inaccurate. So that's one, or Arabic. Arabic, there's a lot of challenges on dialects for Arabic. So we started to build data sets in all those dialects and train models. And the interesting thing is when you have a model A and you train it, it's a completely different model after you train it. So we could acquire open source or pre-established models, and then with our data sets, we will create a new version of it that the IP will belong to us, and then we can just work with that new model under the right licensing. So as we start to do that, we encounter another challenge, and it was the interpretation, the translation of those with context. And then as we go through those, we found another challenge, and was outside of the AI. It was the infrastructure, the 30-year-old internet infrastructure, the content delivery networks, and how did you accelerate speed on those? So we built technology that it's outside of TCP/IP protocols, so different transmission protocols that makes the speed really, really fast. Latency is very low outside of the AI, so into the content delivery networks. So when you start putting all of that together, we have a really strong technology that will do live interpretation. So that's what we focus on, which is a really big problem to solve, is as the words are spoken, just do an interpretation on the fly. So just to give you an example, and then we put the technology on phone systems. So no app, no internet. Jeff, I'll call you right now and talk to you in Spanish, and you hear me in English. And you talk to me in English and you in Spanish as the words are being pronounced.
So okay. So I just want to give everybody an idea of the scope of this. So you started with transcription, you moved to translation, you're building out data sets for different languages and dialects, and you're to the point where not just written translation, but spoken translation is happening in real-time settings. So to compare that, a couple of years ago, I was in Greece with my wife. We were tracking down her family, and we ended up in some churches talking to priests who only spoke Greek. And the conversation, if you can call it that, was us typing in or speaking into Google Translate, and then waiting for it to translate, and then showing it to them, and him doing it back to us. And it was surprising that we that we even had much coherence between us when we were doing that. That where does your technology get deployed? Who's using it? Aside from a one-off person who could have benefited from it, doing some family history research in a Greek church. And
No, Jeff, this is fantastic. So first, we focus on B2B. So we have not deployed.
Mhm.
We have some board advisors that tell us to deploy B2C apps, but I see that market crowded and
Yeah.
not sophisticated or secure. Like we cannot add too much value, and it's rapidly becoming a red ocean. So
Okay.
the B2B is a more difficult world. It's more of a blue ocean. And there's great need for that.
Yeah.
Especially, honestly, one of the greatest challenges is legal. A lot of people don't understand, but when you go to the last mile to actually implement AI technology, most of these enterprises across the world, they have a AI council that is mostly served by lawyers, IP lawyers. So,
Hmm.
and they approve after the CTO, after the CEO, after the CIO, after the chief experience officer or customer officer. After all of that, you just have this AI council dominated by these by lawyers, and sometimes they don't know what they don't know. But one
Yeah.
thing, it's to protect intellectual property.
Right.
So you actually, and what happens is that last year, 90% of the AI POCs, proof of concepts, got canceled by the AI councils across the world. So
Hmm.
now you have CTOs, you have providers, you have CEOs frustrated, and a lot of organizations are not getting the uh, intellectual property aspect right, which is something that
Yeah.
we have worked quite a bit. So with that said, we have passed those AI councils, and now we work with some of the largest institutions. So first is business to business. We're highly regarded on security and intellectual property, and some of our clients are the Vatican. The Vatican was actually one of our first clients,
Hmm.
which is a really difficult client in terms of GDPR and compliance.
Right.
It's actually one of the first entities that was kind of against AI at the time, yet they were open enough to look at technology, and we were scrutinized by them and their security. One of the toughest security audits that we had was through the Vatican. So
Well,
Vatican is a client. We have United Nations has been a client. We have Department of Defense. So I presented personally several times at the Pentagon, and we have U.S. Navy use our technology.
and these guys are using they're deploying this in like group meetings, councils, or where would somebody deploy this?
There are mainly three use cases. Um,
Uh-huh.
80% of those are on one of the use cases. So the first use case will be an event. So you
Okay.
walk into an event. Actually, there was an event this year, Silicon Slopes, Tech
Hmm.
Week, and we did at the event. You walk into a room, you QR code a link, and on your phone you can hear the speaker in any language. We did it with Mark Cuban. So Mark Cuban
Hmm.
was talking in English, and there were people hearing him in Spanish, in Portuguese, and in Ukrainian
Wow.
early this year. And it's on the fly, so you hear it as the
Yeah.
guy is pronouncing the words. Which I can talk more about the technology and why that is so difficult, and why Nvidia had a relationship with us with them.
Yeah.
The second use case is talking on a video conference call. So we have an app. you put it on your computer, and then it intercepts the audio from your headset um, through the Microsoft Teams or Zoom, and it intercepts and will do the translation on the fly and put it back in. So
Okay.
that's another use case. And the one that we work the most is call centers throughout the world. So we put the
Oh, okay.
technology on a call center software. It's called Call Center as a Service. So these are companies. It's called CCaaS
Okay.
providers. So these is companies like InContact or Nice CX1, Ring Central, Five9, Genesis, Dialpad. And
Hmm.
what these companies do is that they provide a call center software um, with this voice over IP. So we put our technology inside that call center, and then if a doctor or wants to talk to their patient in their language, they pick up the phone, they make a selection on the software, and they start talking in English, and the person can hear them in Arabic, and vice versa.
Hmm.
And so we have
Wow.
insurance companies, Accenture. We have a global agreement with Accenture, and we have received revenue, and we have deployed our technology with some of Accenture's clients throughout the world.
I know that you mentioned before that you have a mission to, I'm going to get this wrong, but to make to improve understanding around the world, right? Throughout the world, by what you're doing. W- why were you the right person to do this? What was it about what you did? Is it your engineering background or your pioneering spirit? What pushed you or drove you to build something like this?
I'm not sure if this is the answer you were expecting, but I'm not sure if I'm the right person. Uh, I,
Well, you've been the right person so far
I,
by default, if nothing else. You've
I,
been doing it, right?
and I think that that's the answer is we make ourselves the right person for the mission that we want to accomplish, right? I don't think
Yeah.
I was not prepared to be a father, definitely not prepared to be a CEO of a public company or to be a member, honorable member, a good member of the community. I'm not prepared to do so many things, a good husband. I think we just we just go and jump into the water and start swimming.
Yeah.
And that hopefully will make us better as we start doing the job. So, so that's one aspect. Now, looking back, there are certainly some aspects that I can connect the dots and say, oh, yeah, actually, that experience really helps. Nvidia is actually an interesting one. Um,
Yeah.
so, um, first, being an engineer really helps, especially my background is in cybersecurity and solutions architect. So I yesterday I spent 2 hours and a half with our solutions architect, just jamming and talking and geeking out about a specific type of implementations in pen downing in England. So we're
Okay.
working with a company that it's working on very intelligence agencies across the world. So these are knowing the background, knowing architecture at that level has really helped me. So I can say, okay, that I'm probably unique towards that, having that knowledge. Then, interesting enough, I had experience on entertainment. So you can probably see on the background, I have a couple of Emmy awards. And part of my career was at BYU Television International. And I got
Yeah.
really in depth with master control, producing companies or executive producing, working with producers across the world, working with um, uh, live sports. And we'll talk
Hmm.
probably more about that specifically. So as I was, having those experiences have really helped me to understand audio. And I did probably over 1,500 hours of content in multiple languages. Then later in my career, we were doing 46 articles in, a dozen languages a day.
Yeah.
So
Wow.
translating and creating processes for interpretation and translation that you don't get used to. Then traveling. I build entities, like legal entities in 32 countries. Like sat down
Hmm.
with lawyers, build a business, go through the taxes, go to the people that are calling you and you're not doing something right with the compliance for that country in Brazil. And it's all the
Yeah.
pain to build a business in Guatemala. So all of that legal aspect, the technology aspect, my being inquisitive, I will say that you overlap all of that. It makes my experience is very unique. And
Yeah.
Jeff, sometimes I get surprised myself. So one of the things that Nvidia was looking is they are looking to do live sports in multiple languages. But
That
I
makes
said,
so much sense when you said that. Yeah.
and imagine the first understanding the why. And a lot of people say, "Oh, the why, it's cool, and it's great." But I know that advertising, one of the most expensive advertising opportunities is actually in live sports,
Yeah.
and the network owns that. So, and the network, when they provide the licensing into Portuguese for Brazil, and they're not providing that content in that language, they're giving licensing rights and they are giving advertising revenue.
Hmm.
And but if they were to keep the language because they produce in that language, there's more revenue for that network. So I understand that because I deal with royalties during my tenure at Begonia University working for their television station. So
Yeah.
understanding that, and then I know the flow of audio in master control and intimately. I understand what are the causes and how you do translation, having someone, audio engineer, and having a director for the intonation of the voice when you do translation. So all of that knowledge came in, and that's when NVIDIA came in and say, hey, we're looking at you, your expertise, and your technology to solve this problem. Can you help us do that? And that's why we are part of their live media team. There's about 15 companies in the world, and three are software specific. And we're one
Hmm.
of those. So this is where I believe I may be unique, but at the same time, in many aspects, we're just pioneering.
Well, and it's funny because you started out by saying, "I'm not sure I am the right person," but then when you describe your background, there can't be many other people with a background like that, that would even be capable of building what you're building today. So technically speaking, it sounds like you're absolutely the right person. So
Well, it depends on the day. Yeah.
well, there's struggles in every business, right? And that's a good segue into kind of maybe a moment to talk about what we talk about here on the show is the breakout arc, right? Every CEO, there you go through kind of different stages in your business where you're building momentum, and then something comes and disrupts or breaks that momentum, and then you got to figure out how to navigate that problem, and we call it the breakout, where you're reflecting and gaining insights and dealing with constraints to be able to overcome the disruption or the break that hopefully leads to some type of breakthrough for the business. So, on that note, what are some of the struggles as you've been building this business over the last 3.5 or 4 years? Are there moments that come to mind where you're like, yeah, we were doing so well, it was like going great, and all of a sudden the brakes just turned on. We either externally or internally something happened that caused disruption to what would otherwise have been a great run if you could have kept the momentum going. Have you run into some of those?
Yeah, and obviously, and but I think it was a little bit different from me. You describe it as there was acceleration and we got decelerated. For me, was more of how do we get traction? Uh,
Hmm.
Basically, when all the numbers add up, why the result it still doesn't match the equation.
What do you mean by that?
What I mean is everything seems to be right. You got the right client with the right employees and with the right person on the other side, the right contract, the right technology. And as you go through all of that, where there was a point we were not seeing as much traction as we expected, or
Hmm.
we are seeing we're talking to all the right companies. They're praising the technology. They want to do the agreements, but we're not seeing the revenue come to sustain the company. So we're seeing what's wrong. Like where are we failing?
Hmm.
And I'm not sure if they were even failing at depths, but why we're not getting the results? Because we were not necessarily doing something wrong, or failing, but was just not getting the right traction. And um, it's a different it's a different way to hit that breakthrough. So
Yeah.
it's starting to go. I call it tweezer moments. And some of my employees will probably laugh when they hear to this, but we go
Did you say tweezer moments?
tweezer moments. So that
Okay.
we go and I don't know, I gave it that name, and they know exactly what it means. Is basically we go, we it's almost going to a war room, sit down, and we start uh, going into very detail and being very careful about every
Mm,
relationship that we have, and try to understand the 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 why, what's stopping the relation to go. So let me give you a very specific example. Um, we got a contract, and the contract had prepaid revenue,
hmm.
and it was in the hundreds of thousands. Well, was one of our first contracts, so we were really happy to deploy, and we're moving forward to deploy, and and we're looking through the implementation of the technology. And as we're building the implementation of technology, we're seeing all of these excuses from the client to implement it. And it's been 1 month, 2 months, 3 months, 4 months. Now we're 6 months into the agreement. I have all these forecasts of revenue in the millions of dollars that
Yeah,
was
revenue
supposed shouldn't,
should have been released by then, right? Yeah.
and then it's not happening. So we call it, okay, tweezer moment. We start having meetings internally, and we end up finding out that the company, the client, actually was expecting to have, let's call it middleware, to connect
Hmm.
with us, and they thought they had it, and they signed the agreement, and they pay, and they did all these things, and we found out that it was not only they don't have it, but they cancel it on their roadmap for the following year.
Oh, so so you're building for something that they've effectively taken off their roadmap, or somebody has taken off parts of it, critical parts of it from the roadmap. So you now have a bridge to nowhere with them.
So, and this is that when you deal with the type of organizations that we work with, which is in the thousands of employees, those things
Hmm.
happen.
Yeah.
But one of my board members, Roy, he's the former chief strategic officer for Verizon, and he tells me,
Hmm.
well, we're that and other companies. Not gonna put necessarily a name, but I said, Saul, you'll be surprised how these large organizations actually kill more entrepreneurs than support them, because the bureaucracy of itself of these large organizations to make a decision kills or will burn the money and the resources of the entrepreneurs, and they just
Yeah.
can't get to the end. So that
Sometimes unintentionally, but sometimes that can be intentional too, or at least it feels that way, right?
eh,
You're
it may feel, I think it's 100% unintentional, but it
yeah.
happens. The fact of the matter is that it happens. So those type of situations, Jeff, I think was a real challenge for the company and for me, because I'm building an expectation for my shareholders. I'm building an
Right.
expectation for the employees. I'm building an expectation for my own self. And then the numbers were not adding up. So to understand, 1 month, 2 months becomes 3 months, and 3 months becomes 6 months. 6 months becomes a year. Those are how you sustain the company, how you keep building, how you maintain the momentum without that traction, and that that has been solved. Not as much as I wish, honestly, uh, but it was very pleasant to see one of um, the VPs, directors saying, we have never had a partner like OneMeta.
Hmm.
They're so patient, so they will work for us in our behalf with our best intentions. And this is the type of individual that will never give a compliment. And to say that in front of other people, and to have him cheer for our company after a year of our relationship, and say those things, and build and have him as a full supporter, um, where now roadmaps have changed into the company to accommodate our technology. And now they can see the revenue aspect of it, which is in the tens of millions of dollars. It's been fascinating. So once we get to, and as I was talking, once you hike and you break through that, then you find that there's another mountain to hike, and there's another breakthrough to have. And I can talk about more eloquently about those and those implementations, specifically for our company.
Yeah. Before we move on to something else, uh, I mean, it seems to me like there are a lot of companies that this is I mean, in a way, it's pretty typical. We celebrate the early win, right? We're like, yes, we closed the customer. Yes, they promised to send us a check. Yes, but there's oftentimes implementation, getting to the end of that financial relationship, if you will, getting to the revenue recognition part of of the of the transaction is often harder than it seems when the deal is closing. How did you, like, in that situation, and maybe it's still ongoing, maybe the revenue is still waiting to be recognized 100%, but in a situation like that where where you do have shareholders, you've got employees, and you've got just the real costs for your business, how do you navigate that conversation among your team?
There's no shortcuts for excellence. So, and the best way to provide excellence is with transparency on those, and
Okay.
you just deal with the situation exactly as it comes, and as it is. Um, so I just bring everybody to the same page, and I present the problem. I'm 100% accountable as the CEO and majority owner of the company. Um, but I just express the situation as it is. And there have been situations where I have to go to my employees, very embarrassing, or I'm not sure the word is embarrassing, but very difficult situations. Because as a CEO owner, you feel that you have to provide no matter what.
Hmm.
Other people can fail, but you cannot fail. And sometimes this whole concept of I have the book, "Leaders Eat Last,"
Hmm.
um, gets really ingrained, and that's important. But sometimes you cannot give what you don't have. So I have come to the situation where I have to go to some of the employees and say, "Hey guys, um, we need to, for a period of time, we need to cut salaries.
Yeah.
I I have to we have to hold the salary for like cash flow purposes for a month or two."
Yeah.
And employees have come back and say, "We're all in."
Hmm.
And to my surprise, I've been expecting for people to scream at me, to resign immediately. So I come very tense already.
Yeah.
Um, and they have come to me and say, "We know the numbers. We know what we're building. So this is only a couple months. Let's go." And they don't even mention it. And to have that support as it makes your day, honestly. And then we go through it, we push it, and we get to the next mountain. So those are difficult moments, and that's how I navigate it, Jeff. I'm not sure if I answer specifically, but that's how.
You did, and I want to ask a follow up on that because it seems to me like you've done a lot of startups. Worked with lots of startups, and all startups go through these tough moments, but we know that, again, maybe going back to what we talked about in the icebreaker, left brain, right brain, right? distinctions, we know that these things happen. We understand that they're relatively common in the chaos of starting a new company and growing a company, and navigating the natural issues that come with it. But still, I think you're I think you're conveying your experience very authentically, where you're saying you go into that meeting, you go into that conversation already tense, because even though you know that these are common issues, it hits us every time we have to deal with an issue directly in our own company, with our own team, with our own investors. Um, why do you think that is for CEOs that have been down this path before? They know the struggles they're going to deal with, and yet it's still, uh, in a sense, maybe harder than it seems like it should be.
I don't know. I'll give you my explanation. I think that we have high expectations, and you cannot have as a high expectations generally in others. Excuse me, that you don't have to yourself.
Hmm.
So, if personally, I hold everyone at a high expectation, and if I do so, then that means that I have to hold myself at a high level.
Yeah.
And I think that that's probably at the core of disappointing or have the perception of disappointing others. Now, with that said, we talk a lot about failure, but do we really accept failure? Um, I know I don't.
On paper, we do, though.
Um,
Everyone says, "Oh, just
um,
fail
um,
fast, fail forward." All these phrases that make it sound like
and
it's
and and I have my own theory about failing or failing fast, and I had that opportunity working for a company called Desert Management Corporation, DMC, and Desert Digital Media, and I learned what it meant to fail fast. And I love the concept of it had helped me with all my businesses. And
Mhm,
at the time, that company was, we were doing content creation, and just to give you an idea, the cost of article in the New York Times is about $7,000. For USA Today, it's about 4,000 when you depreciate everything. And then for Oklahoma Herald, it was about $400 at the time. So
okay.
our cost per article was $7. Um,
7 at
$7.
1,000th of the New York Times.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
And we were having a lot more impressions. Now we built a network of people to write articles. We had different layers. Also, we wrote in different languages. But also, we had built a network of 252 million followers. We were probably
Okay.
the top five network on Facebook at the time. We were definitely in the top 10. With you know, Coca-Cola had 85. Disney actually had a little bit more. They had about 320 million followers. We have 252 million followers. And
Okay.
so and I was the general manager, I built everything from scratch. So if we only had $1 million and to cost to fail, it's $1 million, you can only fail once.
Right.
If your cost to fail is $100,000, you can only fail 10 times.
Right.
But if your cost to fail was $7, then you can fail how many times creating articles. So usually by your 30 plus time, between 30 to 150, you will figure it out. I
Mhm.
mean, you just cannot fail that much until we figure it out.
Right.
Like our natural tendencies to solve problems. So when you say fail fast, I have learned that there's actually a formula. It's identifying what is your cause for failure, what is your wrong way, and then how many times can you fail. If I can fail like 50 to 100, 150 times, well, I'll know that I'll make it.
Yeah.
So that's what it means to me, fail fast.
I haven't heard that before, but I can see from an engineer's standpoint that that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah,
Like, let me work this backwards, and yeah, it's okay. Carry the one. Yep. We can we fail enough? Can we fail enough to get to success?
yeah,
That's really what that formula is.
yeah.
So. I like that. I like that a lot. Well, I know we're kind of coming up on time here, but and you've probably got many, many more stories about building OneMeta. Where would you like to see, to the extent that you can share, where would you like to see this company grow to in the next few years?
So I want to have a billion interactions, at least a billion interactions a year, ideally with a billion people.
That sounds like a ton. So, put that in perspective for me. Like, what does that compare to with other companies or other? How would I relate to what a billion transactions are?
So a billion interactions, I can give you the number that I backed up in my mind. So I think a conversation, it's anywhere from 7 minutes to 15 minutes.
Okay,
So I would like to have a billion interactions a month. That means that I would like to have about 15 billion minutes in a year
of
of
interactions
conversations using our technology.
going through. Yeah. Okay.
So that's kind of where my head is at, and I'm constantly thinking, where are those interactions? Are those interactions between a doctor and a patient? Are those interactions in a coffee shop in an airport? Are those interactions in IT support between Nestle and someone fixing their computer? Are they
Yeah.
with Conagra talking to the HR employees across the world? Or that's kind of where my head is at. It's I want 15 billion minutes a year at the very least.
How many minutes does one person have in a year? I haven't done that math
So
lately.
there are about, if I recall correctly, 7 million minutes in a year. Let me see,
Something like that.
minutes.
60 times 24 times 365. Is that what we're
Yeah,
like?
there's much less. It's about 50, half a million minutes in a
Half a
calendar
million.
year. Yeah, half a million
Okay.
minutes, 525,600 minutes in a
Yeah.
year. So,
Well, that makes it like put in reference, one full year of my life is half a million minutes, and you want to get to 15 billion minutes. That's quite the reach. You have, yeah.
and I think that the consumption is there. As we look at call centers, some of our call centers, some of our clients, they do about 5 to 10 billion minutes a year, just one client,
Okay,
and we have
just
dozen
one.
of
Okay,
those.
well, that's impressive. What's it going to take for you to get there? What are the, as you look at from where you are to 15 billion,
Um,
minutes? What are the one or two milestones that you see along the way?
Deployment. So we already have the contracts to reach 15 billion minutes. Those contracts
Okay,
are already signed and in place,
okay,
which is, I think, is probably the most difficult aspect of it. So we've been very good because of the technology. We've been very good at attracting the type of clients at scale, and they trusted some of the largest companies in the world. They have done incredible due diligence. So the possibility to get to 15 billion minutes, it's there. We have the
okay,
contract signed, so the pipeline is there. So now it comes down to deployment. So these clients will have 26,000 clients. We have a client that have about 500,000 clients. So now it's deploying to them, and then you know training the models for those specific companies. We didn't go too much into security, but we built a technology where every model live in its own tenant for every client, and the data set is for every single client. So it's completely
so it's
isolated from every
all
other client.
localized,
Yeah, and
all controlled.
we have built some on-prem solutions, which there's a huge trend, Jeff, right now, um, from companies to going from hyperscaler back because of AI, security, and
Hmm.
intellectual property. Now companies want to have their whole data center, back into their offices, and people are, like Dell hasn't been selling much of a hyperscaler opportunities in the last, couple of years. They're all selling on-prem solutions.
What would you, for other listeners who are hearing your story and your ambitions and some of the things you've dealt with? What would you say? what would you tell some of them as, tips or hints or encouragement
I,
to take away from your experience?
there's a lot of lessons. Um, for some reason, this one came to my mind as you're asking the question. I had I have become an incredible mentor and dear friend, someone that I truly admire, um, Paul. And he told me something. He said, Saul, you have to find the joy of missing out. And it's not about the fear of missing out.
Hmm.
It's about the joy of missing out, the joy of saying no and focus on the one thing. And that's not an easy place to get because as a CEO, as an entrepreneur, you're always looking to not missing out because you always think like, where is that opportunity under that rock? Let me turn around to see if I can find that golden nugget where
Yeah.
nobody have seen. And you're always looking. But on the contrary, having joy in not turning that rock, in understanding that the path and the focus is so clear that you're not diverting any energy on what doesn't value, what doesn't matter. That's hard. And getting
Hmm.
there, getting to a point of the joy of missing out, and finding that joy, it's key. There's always a balance, but that's key. That's some of the lessons I've learned.
Just to say, I love that twist too, because a lot of people, when you talk strategy, they're like, "Oh, you've got to learn to say no," but you're actually adding another layer on top of that, which goes back to what we talked about in our icebreaker segment about, a decision to be happiness is a
Mhm.
decision, not just a journey, and you've just meshed very well, I think, meshed the decision to be happy with the strategic notion of saying no so you can focus on what's most important, all in one statement of, find the joy in missing out. That's clever. I haven't heard that before.
Well, it's not mine. It belongs to Paul. So
Well, thank you, Paul.
yes,
So,
he's in Africa right now. So yeah.
oh,
Um,
fantastic.
um, Jeff, thank you. Thanks for the lesson, and the time and the lessons taught as you're directing this podcast. This is fantastic. Can't wait to do it again another time.
Well, I really appreciate you coming on. You really make the show. I just try to keep up with the conversation as it's going. But thank you for coming on, sharing about your journey building OneMeta, and where you're headed with that, and some of the insights and struggles and lessons that you've learned from that. It's been a pleasure, Saul.
Excellent.
And thanks to our audience that joined us again on this episode of the Breakout CEO. Be sure to follow or subscribe on your favorite podcast platform. And if you enjoy the show, a rating or a review goes a long way. Our mission is to promote the stories of breakout CEOs in scaling SaaS, e-commerce, and tech companies to equip peer CEOs with valuable perspectives and confidence. Thanks again for joining us on this episode of The Breakout CEO. I'm Jeff Holman, and I'll see you next time.